From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening, I'm Maurice Dubois.
I'm John Dickerson.
Terror attacks in this country have fortunately been rare. Even more rare, a terror attack in which the weapon is a car bomb.
But that is what the FBI is investigating right now. The late Saturday morning car bombing outside a fertility clinic in Palm Springs, California.
The only person killed was the suspected bomber. At least 4 other people were injured, but judging by the size of the explosion, it could have been much worse.
As for the motive, investigators say the suspect appeared to be against procreation. They say his target was a clinic that helped people achieve their dreams of having children.
A source tells CBS News that in an angry set of writings believed to be that of the suspects, he talked about wanting to live stream his suicide and the bombing. Jonathan Vigliotti is in Palm Springs tonight. Jonathan.
Maurice, a good evening to you. It's been 2 days since this attack and still many questions remain, including what kind of device was used, where did the materials come from, and how was it constructed? We've learned it was a chemical mixture, and the blast was so powerful it caused damage for several blocks. In the aftermath of the explosion outside a Palm Springs fertility clinic, what continues to stun investigators is the sheer size of the blast. Akil Davis is with the FBI.
This is probably the largest bombing scene that we've had in Southern California.
The impact of the car bomb could be felt miles away. Destruction was visible for over 100 yards in all directions. The suspect, 25-year-old Guy Edward Barkis, was killed in the explosion. A law enforcement official tells CBS News that investigators have found bomb-making materials inside the suspect's home in the community of 29 Palms. That's an hour's drive from the Palm Springs clinic. They're also digging through his computers, phones, and online records.
We are treating this as an intentional act of terrorism. We are tracking a possible manifesto out there. The subject had nihilistic ideations, and this was a targeted attack against the IDF facility.
Given the size of the explosion, investigators say this could have been catastrophic. On Saturday, the clinic was closed, but all the embryos were saved.
We were like, okay, well, if we don't do anything, the bad guy wins.
Palm Springs Deputy Fire Chief Greg Lyle and an FBI agent ran into the clinic, helped restore the power, then salvaged thousands of medical records.
You had no idea who you were helping. Yeah. You were just triggered to act.
Right. I got a text from one of our fire personnel, and he said thank you. You know, it was his family, his wife that was supposed to go in for an appointment this week, and his embryos were in the office.
Jonathan, this attack happened on Saturday when the clinic was closed. What do we know about the timing and why on this particular day?
Yeah, John, it's a good question. The FBI, we have learned, is investigating several theories. The main theory that this was a suicide bombing meant to be live streamed. The second theory here is that the suspect intended on planting this bomb only for it to be detonated days later at another time. Regardless of the scenario, it speaks to a level of radicalization that is very rare and uncommon here in the U.S., John.
And Jonathan, do we have any idea why the attacker chose this particular location? And might there have been other plans for other attacks here?
Yeah, that is still a critical question, why the attacker chose this location and if the bomb materials that were found at his home were intended for another target. Officials tell us as the investigation continues, the threat here has been contained.
Okay, Jonathan Vigliotti in Palm Springs tonight. Thank you.
The Supreme Court today allowed the Trump administration to revoke legal protections the Biden administration gave to roughly 350,000 Venezuelan migrants.
This could clear the way for their deportation. Manuel Bojorquez reports how this decision affects protected migrants who live and work in Miami and other parts of South Florida.
On a recent visit to Miami's Little Havana neighborhood, we found conversation about temporary protected status heating up.
You think it's bad for them to remove the status, pero sigues con tu apoyo al presidente. You still approve President Trump. So you continue to support the president. This is iconic Domino Park, where many Cuban Americans come to enjoy their favorite pastime, playing dominoes. And in between games, some have told us that they agree with President Trump on most things except this. Cubans, Venezuelans should have a right to be protected.
Clearly, yes, she said. Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, allows immigrants from countries in turmoil to legally stay and work in the U.S. for 18 months or more. A Biden-era policy known as humanitarian parole does the same. Trump vows to end both, leaving hundreds of thousands of people in limbo and facing deportation. In South Florida, that includes Cubans, Nicaraguans, Haitians, and Venezuelans. It was President Biden in 2021 who made Venezuelans who fled the economic and political crisis in their homeland eligible for TPS. The Trump administration says TPS and humanitarian parole have become back channels for immigrants to stay longer than necessary and questioned the Biden administration's vetting of recipients. In Doral, Florida, 40% of the population is estimated to have ties to Venezuela.
What happens if they have to go?
The city's not going to be the same.
Maureen Porras is Doral's vice mayor.
We need to have some real common sense, permanent solutions to these immigrants that have been coming in, that have been contributing, that are law-abiding, that are part of our communities, and have been adding value to our city and our communities.
While the Supreme Court decision potentially allows the administration to move forward with deportations, the justices also appear to signal that Venezuelans who had received their legal documentation before President Trump ended the program could sue to fight their removal.
Manuel Bajorges, thank you.
Now, more of the top stories from around the world in the evening news roundup. President Trump spoke separately by phone with the leaders of Ukraine and Russia and said both have agreed to immediately begin ceasefire negotiations, but no date or place has been announced. The diplomatic push came shortly after Russia hit Ukraine with one of its largest drone attacks of the war.
Federal investigators say the Brooklyn Bridge was not significantly damaged when it was struck by a Mexican Navy ship in the East River on Saturday. Here's senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve.
The NTSB says it is still waiting for permission from the Mexican government to get on board this ship. It's a bit of an unusual process for the NTSB, but it's because it's a foreign naval vessel. Now, investigators are just getting started, but say whatever went wrong happened within about 5 minutes between when the ship essentially backed out of its parking spot and when it hit the Brooklyn Bridge, killing 2 Mexican sailors and injuring at least 19. We're hearing for the first time a tugboat assisting the ship radioed for help less than a minute before impact. Now, so far, no word on cause, and because the NTSB hasn't been able to get on board, they are yet to confirm any of the initial reports about mechanical or engine failure.
President Trump today signed a revenge pornography law backed by First Lady Melania Trump. It bans posting explicit images online without consent, including so-called deep fake nudes made by artificial intelligence. You may recall our Jim Axelrod spoke with a teenage victim who had urged lawmakers to take this action after her fake nude photos circulated for 9 months on Snapchat. The news that former President Joe Biden has stage 4 prostate cancer that has spread to his bones has some asking whether it could have been diagnosed sooner.
I talked today with Dr. Dana Rathkoff, a medical oncologist at New York's Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. She specializes in prostate cancer.
I see prostate cancer almost exclusively. It doesn't follow any one pattern.
Does it surprise you that it is so advanced and moving so quickly, given that he has seen the best doctors possible?
Cancer cells are chaotic, and they don't read the guideline rule books. And so our screening guidelines don't necessarily apply to a cancer cell that's going to decide to grow or evade a particular screening technique. And so, there are many people that have the, access to highest levels of care and undergo regular screening and still get diagnosed with advanced disease.
Given what he has been diagnosed as having, how long would he have had cancer, do you think, before this diagnosis?
Well, I can't really speak to the specifics of President Biden, but I would say that in general, advanced prostate cancer presents in many different ways. It's not really one size fits all.
It's stage 4 and in the bones. That didn't start just yesterday.
Typically, a more aggressive prostate cancer portends a worse prognosis, meaning that patients are at higher risk of having cancer grow quickly and or having cancer spread outside of the prostate. And when cancer spreads outside of the prostate to other parts of the body, we consider that metastatic. And so the most common place for prostate cancer to metastasize to is, in fact, the bone.
So if you were presented with a person with this case, you wouldn't say, oh, they missed it.
No, I would not say that.
So, John, for men over 70 watching this, wondering how does this apply to them? What's the doctor have to say about that?
The doctor said she's been getting calls the minute the news broke. First, her point is don't generalize from a single case. If you are concerned about this, talk to your doctor. She talked about shared decision making. And she said it's not necessarily the case if you're over 70 that you get a PSA test or a prostate test, because in some cases there can be false positives or the treatment can be worse than living a life with a cancer that's going to be very slow going, and it may outlive you. So basically, she said, talk to your doctor.
Solid advice. Yes. All right, thanks, John. Still ahead here on the CBS Evening News, Lonnie Quinn on the latest tornado threat in the south central United States.
And we will have these stories.
I'm Ian Lee in Middleton, Wisconsin. This used to just be called shop class. Now it's a pipeline for a potential six-figure career. Students trading keyboards for tool belt without the college debt. That's tonight's Eye on America.
I'm Janet Shamlian in Trinity, Texas. Rural hospitals are a small town's beating heart, and when they close, it's like pulling life support on the entire community. That's next on the CBS Evening News.
Having health insurance is no guarantee that you will get health care, not if you live in rural America. New report says hundreds of rural hospitals are in danger of closing because they can no longer afford to stay open.
The main reason: insurance pays rural hospitals less than their big city counterparts for the same services. Here's Janet Shamlian.
We were there as workers covered the emergency room signs at Midcoast Medical Center in Trinity, Texas. The sight of medical workers leaving for the last time, signaling this is one of the latest rural hospitals to shut its doors.
I think how sad it is.
Marjorie Polvino runs the hospital board.
It has a huge impact on the committee. We will lose lives. 400 people a month come here.
In the East Texas Piney Woods, Midcoast was more than a building. It was a lifeline where babies were born and where the heart of Kathy Courtney's 90-year-old husband was restarted, saving his life.
How many times have you used this facility recently?
I'd say about 6 times in the last 14 months.
The closure, hospital officials tell us, was driven by the same factors that have closed other rural hospitals. Low reimbursement rates from elderly patients' Medicare and Medicaid coverage, which made up most of the hospital's budget. Hospitals in urban areas get significantly more reimbursement from their patients who have private insurance, which tends to pay more. Republican proposed cuts to Medicaid could leave more than 8.5 million people uninsured and force even more rural hospitals to close. A new report finds almost 750 rural hospitals are at risk of closing. Courtney's husband is now home and doing well, but the 87-year-old isn't sure she could drive that far if she or her husband of 65 years had another emergency.
When your husband had a heart attack recently, how long did it take you all to get here?
Probably 10 minutes, 15.
And if you had to go to the next closest hospital, how long would that have taken?
Over a half an hour.
Is that the difference between perhaps life and death?
I would say it is.
So, Janet, when these rural hospitals close and folks end up having to drive a long way, what's the overall impact on their health as a result?
They often give up on preventative care, things like regular checkups, and that can lead to the delayed, diagnosis of something like a serious illness like cancer.
What about the effect of these hospitals closing on the community, Janet?
It is beyond the hospital. These hospital workers shopped in the stores, they ate in the restaurants. If they move to a new area for a new job, that affects the real estate market, the school district, property taxes. These rural hospitals are more than health care. They really are the heartbeat of the community.
Okay, Janet Shamlian reporting tonight. Thank you.
Tornado watches are up tonight for the center of the country from Texas north to Nebraska.
Lonnie Quinn once again tracking the severe storm threat tonight. Lonnie.
Guys, it is not just tornado watches. We have tornado warnings in effect as of right now. Look at this situation. This is Plevna, Kansas. In the middle of the night last night, that tornado came through. I look at some of the damage in the town. Some homes not touched, others completely wiped out. That, I would guess, is an EF3 or stronger based on the signature of the damage. The line currently stretches from the Texas-Oklahoma border all the way up into Utah, and there are plenty of warnings currently in that area. Anything shaded in red is a tornado that's suspected to be on the ground or may actually be on the ground. Where does it go, though, from here? You get into the nighttime hours, into the overnight, the morning, the afternoon, it's pushing all the while towards the Tennessee Valley. And tomorrow, we're going to keep a close eye on places like Memphis, over towards Nashville, down to Jackson, Mississippi, even Kentucky could have a problem again tomorrow. Gentlemen?
We are in warning season. Thank you, Lonnie.
All right, Eye on America is next.
Tonight, the growing popularity of trade schools. The high cost of a college education and the prospect of decades of debt has younger Americans looking for an alternative. Many are turning to the trades. The cost of learning a trade can be much lower, and skilled labor is in demand, so there are plenty of good-paying jobs. Ian Lee has tonight's Eye on America.
At Middleton High School in Wisconsin, shop class is back and booming.
And this is the way we're going to assemble it. We're going to take
For 3 decades, Justin Zander has shaped wood and minds.
My goal is to teach them comfort and skills, so they become comfortable with a few skills, and those skills will be transferable from many different trades.
The revival is fueled by the demand for tradespeople, and with some paying 6-figure salaries, what were once blue-collar jobs are now gold-collar.
It used to be kids were interested in it as a sideline. Now the kids are interested in it because it could lead to a good-paying job for the future.
Middleton High built a $90 million campus in 2022, putting trades in the spotlight, part of a larger trend embraced by 27 states that increased spending on tech ed by an average of $182 million.
I think it's a pretty easy option to go into a trade job, especially if you have some experience in these classes.
Aiden Dowd is like more than 75% of students here who take tech ed classes.
And I'm choosing to go into the trades.
You're pursuing what you love.
Yes.
Interest in trade schools has nearly doubled since 2017, while university enrollment has declined slightly since the pandemic. Talia Madden is a senior taking building construction.
I think that's really important is, showing kids, even just from the get-go, that college isn't the only option.
Here at Middleton High, students can take woodworking, welding, and robotics.
This robotic arm isn't just a cool classroom gadget, it's the real deal. Students here at Middleton High are learning to program the same kind of industrial robots used in factories across the country.
Shop classes helped a lot.
Carlos Welter once got his hands dirty in these same classrooms.
There's a lot of freedom around here.
He got a job right away at Zurn Building Products, putting that experience to use.
Has there been any discussion about, if they're going and getting college debt and you're straight into the workforce?
Oh yeah, we always give each other a bunch of crap about that, so.
For Justin, his return on investment is introducing kids to a profitable way of life he loves.
I'm not opposed to having kids smiling when they leave the room.
I'm seeing you're smiling a lot by talking about it. You really enjoy what you do.
I absolutely love teaching. I can't imagine.
There's no alternative.
There's nothing else.
Making it in America starts with more people than ever seeing trades as a ticket to a promising future. For Eye on America, I'm Ian Lee in Middleton, Wisconsin.
That's it for the evening news for now. I'm John Dickerson. See you on Evening News Plus.
I'm Maurice Dubois. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Welcome to CBS Evening News Plus. I'm John Dickerson. Multiple deadly storms in Kentucky, Missouri, and Virginia plow a path of destruction. Those rebuilding turn to the understaffed Federal Emergency Management Agency, an agency President Trump has talked about eliminating. Nicole Valdez reports from Kentucky. And former President Joe Biden is diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. As Americans are living longer, rates for prostate cancer are on the rise. We'll discuss the disease and treatments in tonight's interview. Those stories and more right after our news headlines. President Trump spoke on the phone for 2 hours with Russian leader Vladimir Putin and separately with his Ukrainian counterpart. In advance of the planned call, Russia launched its largest drone barrage against Ukraine since the start of the war. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board say there is no significant structural damage to New York City's Brooklyn Bridge after a Mexican Navy ship crashed into it over the weekend. 2 people aboard the ship were killed. While federal investigators have not boarded the ship, New York police say the crash may have been caused by a mechanical failure. Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans were given temporary protected status because conditions there were deemed too dangerous for their safe return. The Supreme Court has now allowed the Trump administration to revoke that status, which would allow deportations. The court said some migrants, however, could still bring legal challenges in some cases. We begin tonight with the threat of severe storms, including possible tornadoes, which will continue to threaten parts of the South and Midwest through Tuesday. A string of tornadoes have already left nearly 30 dead. Residents will now turn to the weakened FEMA to help them recover. CBS's Nicole Valdez reports.
They are picking up the pieces in London, Kentucky. This is what's left of Michael Karn's home. He clung to his family as he heard the walls crumbling around them.
We ran into the closet under the stairs, which we thought was the safest place, which it was, because it's basically the only place that wasn't damaged at all.
Friday's tornado killed 19 people statewide.
Kind of numb at first, I'm sure. Once we sit down and decompress, it'll probably hit harder.
Severe weather has caused so much destruction in the bluegrass state. Extreme rainfall has led to extreme flooding in Kentucky's wettest year on record. And so far this year, 42 reported tornadoes. People here are going to need a lot of help, and there are city, county, and state resources already set up. We're told FEMA is on the ground, but the agency is facing challenges of its own. CBS News has learned FEMA has lost about a third of its staff. 1,800 taking President Trump's buyout offer. Another 200 or so probationary workers were fired. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear said Saturday leaders at FEMA vowed to help.
I have no criticisms of their operations on the ground, and that's coming from a guy who's had disagreements with this president, but they've done a good job when FEMA has come into Kentucky, and I'm grateful.
For now, Carnes and his neighbors are feeling overwhelmed. What's next?
We'll probably file with Red Cross and FEMA and just try to get as much help as we can to rebuild or move on.
So, Nicole, where is the storm threat headed next?
Well, John, we traveled 200 miles from eastern Kentucky to right here in Nashville as a new storm put thousands more at the threat of those dangerous storms.
Nicole Valdez for us. Thank you. House Republicans' massive budget plan barely made it out of the committee for a second straight vote. It advanced Sunday night only after hardline conservatives voted present rather than reject the Trump tax extension and Medicaid cuts outright. Given the challenges thus far, House Speaker Mike Johnson called it a big win. For more, we are joined by CBS's congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. So, Nicole, there are a few more sticking points. It's so hard to keep up with the sticking points, but one of the biggest sticking points is over this disagreement over Medicaid. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, well, this is one that has been a sticking point throughout the duration of this package. And at this point, some of the disagreement has to deal with work requirements. Many conservative House Republicans would like to see those work requirements phased in sooner, whereas you have other more moderate members who feel like that should hold out a little longer just because they don't want cuts to be too extreme and too soon, too fast. So that is one of the areas of disagreement among many. But Speaker Johnson remains confident that he can work out the differences among his conference, and President Trump will be addressing House Republicans in their conference meeting tomorrow morning to try to sell them on this deal.
Move too fast and too soon. Not only is it more people are affected, but those rural hospitals that Janet Shamlin reported on get affected. Nicole, will you help us understand the timeline for the next steps here?
Well, again, House Republicans are nearing the finish line in terms of this bill that they've been working on for the better part of several months now. So they are hoping to move it through the Rules Committee at 1 a.m. this Wednesday. If it clears that committee, it would go to the full House floor for a vote. Hopefully by Thursday. That's the aim of the Speaker. His goal is to get this passed by the Memorial Day recess. But certainly we keep hearing from GOP aides, nothing is final until it's final. So that timetable could potentially slip.
Nicole Killian from Capitol Hill. Thank you so much, Nicole. The head of the United Nations Humanitarian and Relief Agency is calling the handful of aid trucks finally allowed into the Gaza Strip today a drop in the ocean of what is urgently needed. CBS's Deborah Patta reports on the food crisis.
Thousands of trucks are lined up just outside Gaza, waiting to cross over. Only 5 were allowed in today. No food, fresh water or medicine has entered the territory for nearly 80 days under an Israeli-imposed blockade. Hunger is so rife that famine is once again stalking Gaza, according to the World Food Programme's Antoine Renard, who's just returned from there.
You have around an estimated 14,000 children that are now facing what we call severe acute malnutrition.
They could die without intervention.
We always wait for when famine is on, but when famine is on, it's already too late. That will be a failure of all the international community.
Previously, Israel had insisted there were no food shortages in Gaza. But for the first time in a social media post, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has admitted Gaza is nearing a hunger crisis. He said he's been told by friends in the US that they cannot endure images of mass starvation. As a result, he's allowing a limited amount of aid. Renard says they have enough food on standby to feed the entire population of Gaza for a month.
It must stop, and we need to reach people where they are, because they are so weak.
Israel says the food blockade is necessary to get hostages back.
The civilian population shouldn't be trapped. There's no reason, actually, to hold them accountable for what they are not part of.
Doctors are running out of supplies. They're barely able to treat malnourished children, let alone the hundreds of injured streaming in day after day. Israel has escalated the war with a new offensive that has seen nearly 600 people killed in 1 week.
It's not just the US that is putting pressure on Netanyahu. In a strongly worded statement today, the leaders of the UK, France and Canada said the level of human suffering in Gaza was intolerable. John?
Deborah Patta in Tel Aviv. Thank you, Deb. Now, here are 3 things to know. The Environmental Protection Agency today lifted a nearly decade-long emergency order on Flint, Michigan's drinking water, saying the city now meets federal lead standards. The crisis started in 2014 when a switch in water sources allowed aging lead pipes to contaminate the supply. The EPA reports 97% of those pipes have been replaced. Lead exposure from the water caused increased developmental issues in children and heightened risks of kidney, blood pressure, and heart problems in adults. The U.S. Census says America's big cities are growing again, reversing a COVID-era trend. According to new estimates, New York City added 87,000 new residents between July of 2023 and July of last year. Houston, San Antonio, and Chicago are among the places to also gain new residents. Some experts cite improving post-pandemic conditions for the growth. Voyager 1 is the farthest human-made object from Earth, about 15.5 billion miles away. Launched in 1977, the probe's primary roll thrusters hadn't worked in over 20 years. But NASA engineers diagnosed the issue, suspected a power switch had flipped, and sent a precise series of commands to bring them back online. Each command took 23 hours to reach the spacecraft, but it worked. Coming up on CBS Evening News Plus, we go in depth on the effort to save once vibrant colored coral reefs from irreversible harm. Beneath the world's oceans, a seismic event is occurring. Coral reefs, essential for maintaining marine life and coastal storm protection, are slowly dying in the climate change-fueled warming waters. In tonight's In Depth, CBS's Karen Hua reports from Hawaii on the underwater efforts to save them.
Hawaii's coral reefs are changing. Jared Taylor has been diving in these waters for several years and sees it.
Sad and disheartening.
He showed us the evidence off the coast of Honolulu. Once vivid colors are now gone.
It was really colorful probably 2 years ago, and now it's all bleached white.
It's not just Hawaii. According to NOAA, 84% of the world's coral reefs are now under heat stress that can cause bleaching. When the ocean warms, the algae that makes corals colorful are pushed out, leaving them as white skeletons.
It's heart-wrenching to see these huge areas, expanses of amazing biological diversity. It's like pulling the plug on a TV and it's just static. It just goes blank. And the recovery is extraordinarily slow to zero.
Over on the Big Island of Hawaii, marine scientist Greg Asner leads the Allen Coral Atlas, a program that maps coral bleaching with the goal of conservation.
And unfortunately, wherever you see green dots, there's coral reef that is bleaching today.
2024 was Earth's hottest year on record, on both land and sea, with the average ocean surface temperature hitting 70 degrees. The heat is speeding up coral deaths. Where it used to take years to kill a reef, now it can be weeks, sometimes days.
Here's the dead part.
The ugly part.
Ugly part. There are some heat waves where you and I would get in the water, might swim around for a while and actually start sweating in the water. Corals and other species that live on the seafloor are much more sensitive than we are.
Compared to Hawaii, the decline is worse in the Great Barrier Reef and Galapagos Islands. The problem is the most severe in the Caribbean and Florida. Reefs also create a natural seawall that can protect coastlines from storms, preventing billions of dollars in flood damage, according to NOAA. So at the end of the day, this is a dire situation, but not all hope is lost. There are some solutions. Underwater nurseries allow coral to repair and regrow. There's also a push to educate tourists to use sunscreens without chemicals harmful to corals.
The next gen, the folks that I'm training now, they could be the ones who could see the recovery phase if we get fossil fuels under control.
A global effort to preserve life and color underwater. Karen Hua, CBS News, South Kona, Hawaii.
President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer. We'll discuss that and why incidents of prostate cancer are on the rise in tonight's interview. In President Biden's first statement since announcing his prostate cancer, the former president said he has learned we are strongest in broken places and gave thanks for love and support. The president is said to be evaluating treatment options. So for tonight's interview, we are joined by Dr. Maha Hussein, Deputy Director of the Robert H. Lurie Comprehensive Cancer Center at Northwestern University. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us. What is the prognosis here? Help us understand it.
Absolutely, and thank you, and it's a pleasure to be joining you. Basically, anytime you have metastatic cancer, especially prostate cancer, it's not a cancer that can be cured. However, the good news today is the fact that we have come a long way with regard to the management of this cancer, with significant improvement in the average longevity. When I entered the field literally in 1990, if somebody developed metastatic disease, their average longevity was about 2.5 years. Right now, the average longevity for patients with metastatic disease is 70 months, almost 6 years, and it's actually improving. And a lot of the improvement is a function of significant improvement in research and new treatments available for patients.
What are the treatments possibly available to the former president?
Yes. So obviously, For metastatic disease, I'll speak in general, and certainly these are options available for all patients potentially, but taking into account different other individual factors. Technically, hormone treatment, or what I would call anti-hormone therapy, is the backbone of the treatment to shut down the testosterone production, which will then starve the cancer. This is combined with additional agents to help deprive the cancer further from any male hormone like hormones circulating in the body. And nowadays we have also triplet therapy with the addition of chemotherapy to the hormone treatment. And again, all of these things take into consideration the patient's comorbidities, the safety of being able to do this, and of course, ultimately, it's a shared decision.
There are a lot of people who are hearing about this and wondering, should I get screened or not? Can you give us guidance on that, particularly with respect to this question of if you're a male over 70?
Yes, the answer is yes. And this is something that discussion happens with the primary care physician. I would say anybody who has symptoms, they should be definitely evaluated. And this can be a combination of care with the primary care physician and referral to urologists. Anybody who doesn't have symptoms, but otherwise okay, in good health, definitely I would say PSA check is going to be important. And if it's slightly elevated, they can wait a little bit and repeat it in 2-3 months and see what the numbers look like, and then decide on the next steps.
We have just a little over 30 seconds.
It should not be ignored.
We have just about 30 seconds here. What's driving the increased incidence of prostate cancer rates?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors. Some of it may be better strategies to detect the cancer. There could be other, biological or exposure reasons that I'm not really aware of specific data. But I think a lot of it is because we're able to diagnose it much better now than we were able to do it before. And one thing I would say is this: the incidence of patients with spread prostate cancer, unfortunately, has gone up since the early detection with checking PSA was removed from the guidelines and things.
All right, Dr. Maha Hussein, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
Uncertainty as an economic strategy. Is it wise? My reporter's notebook is next. The Treasury Secretary says uncertainty is a strategy.
The strategic uncertainty is a negotiating tactic. So if we were to give too much certainty to the other countries, then they would play us in the negotiations.
The moment you label uncertainty a strategy, doesn't it stop being either? But leaving that aside, here's what's not in dispute. Business leaders say uncertainty makes it nearly impossible to plan. Under this administration, tariff policy has changed more than 50 times, according to a Washington Post analysis. Executives I've spoken with say they can't make long-term bets when the rules keep changing. To understand the psychology behind that, I called George Wu, professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago Business School. The default reaction to uncertainty, he explained to me, is paralysis. He told me about a study. College students are told to imagine they've taken a high-stakes exam. One group is told they passed. One group is told they failed. The third group isn't told anything. All of them are then offered the chance to buy a discounted vacation. Most of the students who passed, they take the vacation. So do most of the students who failed. But the ones who didn't know how they did on the test, they freeze. The president and his team have said tariffs will lead American business to make vast investments in equipment and hiring in America. But that only happens if decision makers feel certain. It's not just psychology, it's politics too. Darrell West, a manufacturing expert at Brookings, told me CEOs don't want to make decisions based on conditions that might change with the next president. CEOs have whiplash, he said. The last guy told me to do this, the new guy's telling me something else. What's the next guy going to do? Trump officials may view uncertainty as leverage, but companies see it for what it is, a fog. And standing still in a fog isn't strategy, it's a stall. And that's tonight's CBS Evening News Plus. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Dickerson. Good night.